to get into the history here, before the invention of sound recording, it's logical if you think about it. The only time that you were able to listen to music was when it was being performed live in front of you, or you were playing it yourself, which is to say, access to music was very limited for much of history. The vast majority of people didn't know about any music that was being made beyond their own town. If it wasn't being made in their own town or their own village, they didn't know about it. So people living in London, England, had absolutely no idea what kind of music was being made in Bogota, Colombia. They probably didn't even know what music was being made across the English Channel in Paris. Johann Sebastian Bach is actually a great example of this. He's a very well-known name now. You might recognize it. He's considered one of the great composers of all time. But he was an obscure name in Europe during the years he was performing, the years of his life in the 1700s. He was not very well known outside of East Germany where he worked. So again, music just was not as ubiquitous as it was today. If you wanted to hear music, you actually had to go to the opera, or you had to go to church to hear, the hymnal music from the organs. Or if you were very wealthy, you would hire a private orchestra to come play in your home. But the vast majority of people obviously didn't have the money for that kind of thing. So it was probably a much quieter world than the one we're in now. Fast forward to the late 1800s, the steam-driven printing presses made sheet music for the first time cheap enough to be profitable as a mass market item. So all this sheet music started getting printed. And this was also the period of time when most every middle class home had some kind of piano in it. So you could ride your horse into town, buy a book of sheet music, you learn how to play it on the piano, and then you play it for your family during the leisure hours of the evening. And music was becoming much more widely consumed in that way. But again, it's still kind of the same problem. If you wanted to hear music, you actually had to play it yourself on the piano. It's just a lot of work relative to just opening up Spotify on your phone. I suppose the flip side of that is that there are probably a lot more competent, skilled musicians back in those days, but it was...
Think about that though. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
And what a hero. What a hero.
Right, exactly.
This guy.
Yeah, exactly. You're the one who actually took the time, learned an instrument, became proficient at it enough to read all kinds of songs off sheet music. There wasn't a lot to do back then. So if you could play the piano well and entertain your family or your neighborhood in that way, you probably were a hero. People were probably very grateful for that. Yeah. So that was, I suppose, one plus in the category of life before sound recording. That does get us to the invention of the first sound recording in 1877. Thomas Edison modeled the first phonograph and recorded his voice onto a cylindrical record. So the first words ever recorded were actually spoken by Edison himself. They were, "Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. Everywhere the child went, the little lamb was sure to go."
No way.
You can actually still, you can look it up and you can still hear it today. The audio quality is not so good as you might imagine, but it was an incredible innovation. He went on to do other things. He was, an incredibly prolific inventor. So I think he maybe didn't realize what he had there, or he was more interested in some of the other projects he was working on. So he kind of put sound recording on the side, and it got picked up by a German-American inventor, Emile Berliner, who 10 years later in 1887 innovated on Edison's invention and developed a method to record onto a lateral cut flat disc record. So no longer a cylinder like Edison had, it's a flat disc. It was exceptionally thick, but beyond the thickness, it looked very similar to the vinyl records that we're all used to today. And thanks to Emile Berliner, the sound quality was much improved. And then the last kind of pit stop here on the timeline I wanted to dig into was in 1925, when electrical recording overtook acoustic recording. So up until 1925, acoustic recording meant one performance, one record. The band had to gather around this big metal flared horn that took in their sound. They're all crowded around it. And whatever they played was printed directly onto the record. And that was that. So if you wanted to make 10 records, you had to play the song 10 times. Incredibly arduous. Electrical recording meant musicians were no longer gathering around a big metal flared horn. They were playing into microphones, just like musicians do today. And they could create as many records as they wanted out of a single performance. So one recording a million records. You can imagine just how much that shifted the economics of sound recording. There are a lot of big milestones after that. You got the cassette tape in 1963, the Walkman in 1979. In October of 2001, as a lot of people will recall, Apple introduced the first generation iPod with the slogan, 1,000 songs in your pocket. That was huge. I think we can all remember the ads with the dancing silhouettes. And then Spotify was founded in Sweden in 2006, which is sort of the preeminent streaming service today. And here we are. The stat that I had foreshadowed earlier came from Statista. It took a survey of Americans in 2019, and the results were that 51% of US adults listen to music every single day, and 92% of adults report listening to music at some frequency, be it every day or a few times a week. So from my vantage point, like, I think everyone likes music. Almost everyone consumes music in the developed world. It looks like in a click of a button, you have access to any artist, any genre from any time period. We can go back and listen to Beethoven, whose work was never actually recorded in the years that he wrote and performed. And now it's all there thanks to many of the wonderful orchestras out there. Listen to Rolling Stones. We can listen to Kendrick Lamar. I think music transcends all walks of life, and for its ubiquity and for, I think, all it's done for us psychologically, I think sound recording is the greatest invention of all time.